some GPs are expected to call for an end to home visits at an upcoming conference because they are too time-consuming. However, with concerns that doing this would put vulnerable people at risk, is this really the best way to help our overstretched doctors? And I have to say, I didn't even realise they still did home visits. Did you?
Yeah,
I didn't know they did.
I mean, you know, there's 2 points. When my mum was poorly, and in fact, in my dad, they live in the northeastern village in the northeast, they have a wonderful service. And without home visits, I don't think my mum would have lasted as long as she did. So I have no complaints about that. However, fast forward to 18 years ago when Louis was a baby and he'd been very sick. He'd been in Alder Hey Hospital. He had 2 operations when he was tiny. So he was on their records as a child with, you know, with problems. And it was a real struggle for me with the surgery I was with at the time, not the one that we're with now. And I could not get them to come out. It was really, really difficult and very, very stressful. And their thing was put him in a car and take him to A&E. But it was kind of like I would have really benefited from a home visit also. I also think, as someone who talks a lot about mental health, that by visiting people in their home who are genuinely poorly, you know, I think that people can tell a lot about the environment in which you live as to what is going on socially and how that may be affecting or influencing how poorly you are physically. So I understand how pushed the doctors are and how time poor they are, but I think it would be a shame to lose home visits completely.
I'll tell you what I think. Medical students don't want to be GPs, do they? Even though the pay has been raised, they know what it's like sitting there allocating 10 minutes to a patient. So there is a real problem there. But I suppose what I don't want to see the end of home visits, but trying to think of a compromise, I would say, why not have the most senior nurses associated with a practice doing home visits, going around to see people. Often people want home visits, as you've implied, Denise, because they've got other issues other than just simple medical conditions. They might be lonely, they might have mental problems or whatever. But I know from my own experience with my elderly relatives that they wanted home visits and they would find it almost impossible to get to the doctors.
Yeah.
And near my house in Kent, they're closing a surgery where all the patients are elderly and they've told them they can get on a bus and go to a medical centre down the road. And I just think in January and February, you know, that's just not fair.
The problem is we don't have a lot of GPs in this country, and that is the sad fact. And I've got a friend of mine, and her daughter has just qualified, spent 7 years at medical school, and then you do GP, and they have to do a little bit everywhere. But she said, I'm sorry, she goes, I want to be a doctor, but GP's not where I want to be. She said, because you don't have the time to really care for patients. She said, I've gone into this profession so that I can sit down with somebody and say, right, what's wrong? How can I help you? She said, I have 10 minutes, and some of these people come and they have dire problems. It's not an illness, there's social problems, there's mental problems, there's a physical illness. And she said, I just don't have the time.
They have to do a one-size-fits-all,
That's right. And she said, and when you can't do your job and you've left that patient and you just know that actually what you've done is not it's not going to help them. She said it's demoralising. And she did say there's a lot of depression if you're a GP. And we just got some stats saying that according to the NHS health programme, female doctors have up to 4 times the risk of suicide compared to people in the general population. And she says, as GPs, they take problems home. You can't just go, right, surgery's closed, I'm going. She says, I think about my patients.
And if I've spent enough time with that person or given them the right, you know, because if you're looking at your clock thinking, I've got another surgery for... I mean, with my... I know you don't have this problem because we have the same. Firstly, it's all big medical centres now. Like, when I was growing up, we had a family doctor. I knew him all my life, you know. He'd pop in for a cup of tea if he was passing, let alone to see anyone. But now it's all medical centres. And it's funny, when I'm filling forms out and they go, name of your GP, I don't know. I have to put just the name of the medical centre.
You can't build up a personal
because I've never seen the same person twice. So it's... And it's always that initial, oh, this is someone new that I'm going to have to explain really personal stuff to. Whereas when you knew them, it was easy.
But we do... Isn't the other thing that, you know, I'm trying to think of a compromise again. If the National Health Service needs to rebrand GPs to make it a more attractive job, but also 50% of their time is spent with paperwork. So maybe we, as patients, ought to allow GPs to have someone else in the room to input all that information. So maybe we ought to allow...
It needs restructuring,
It
doesn't
needs
it?
Well,
I've
For
got-
people to do the job.
Listen for this as an example, a comment here from Natalie. She said, I called to see if a doctor could come out to my mum at home as she couldn't get to the surgery. They diagnosed a chest infection over the phone and arranged for a prescription to be collected. She died less than a week later of double pneumonia and respiratory failure. And maybe if he had come out, he would have known how bad it was.
Yeah. I've got Kelly here. She's put, if it wasn't for a home visit from our GP, I probably wouldn't be here today. I was diagnosed with meningitis. My mum thought I had the flu because of my symptoms. However, when the doctor arrived, an ambulance was called and I was admitted to hospital. So there is a necessity in our
But
communities
like you
out
say,
there.
it does need to be restructured because at the moment, with the amount the doctors are working, there genuinely wouldn't
Yeah,
be the
they
time
haven't got
for
the
them
time,
to do
no.
do the home
Well, we did
visits. It's difficult.
a poll as well. The result is, should GP home visits be scrapped? 93% of you said no. So that's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.